more fantastic models to show you.
We'll talk a little bit about two-part epoxy putty.
And some advice on keeping your 3D printed figures from turning from this to this. Next on Hot Off the Bench. Well, hey guys, and welcome back to another Hot Off the Bench. This is September 2021. I did not get a chance to put a segment together for August, just way too many things going on, but I did have a chance to put one together here for September. So I have a great slideshow to kick off with here. But before I do that, I want to direct you to a link below to a YouTube channel called Todd's Corner. This is Todd Morton of Space 1999 Props and Shifts. This is his YouTube channel. Really nice guy. A lot of fun to hang out with both him and Gordon Moriguchi during this interview. They contacted me a little bit ago to see if I'd be willing to come on their little YouTube show that they put on, I think, monthly. And it was really a lot of fun hanging out with them. So if you're interested in that interview, just follow the link below. All right, it's now time to start our slideshow. And because it was Star Trek's 55th anniversary this last week, let's go ahead and begin with some Star Trek builds. First, we have a model from Mark Meyers, who is a very talented builder. This is the 1/32 scale model of the Galileo from Polar Lights, and Mark has done quite a nice job at producing a model that looks like the filming miniature. He mixed various colors to come up with just the right shades of gray for the exterior, and Mark built an interior as well. And check out the display that Mark made here, recreating the set seen in the episode Galileo 7. Just outstanding work, Mark. Thank you. Next are these amazing figures by modeler Matt Mrozek. These 1/6 scale vinyl figures were released in the 1990s by a company called Geometric Designs and are by far the best I've ever seen them painted. Geometric Designs was founded by a gentleman named George Stevenson, and the company is no longer in business, but you can find George selling his latest creations at blackheartmodels.com. The sculpts are good likenesses of the characters, and Matt did an incredible job bringing them to life with his painting and detailing. Matt says you can follow a 5-part video series he has on his channel about these figures, and the link is below. Really astounding work here, Matt. Very, very nice. Thanks for allowing me to share it. Next, let's pay a visit to Deep Space Nine with this beautiful model built by modeler Matt McGuire. He not only took on the tedious task of drilling out all the windows, but continued going the extra mile by attaching the Enterprise and the Defiant and lighting them all up. The station model is supposed to be a 1/3300 scale, and some have pointed out that the Enterprise is not quite in scale as it was constructed from the 1/2500 model. To me, it really doesn't make much difference because it makes for a spectacular display either way. Really nice work, Matt. Congrats on such a wonderful build. And thanks for allowing me to share it. Well, let's make the jump from the 24th century and take a trip back to the 1980s with a couple of iconic helicopters from that decade by modeler Ian Parham. First is this beautiful model of the copter from Blue Thunder. This model kit is now hard to find and was originally released by Monogram Models back in 1984. It is a 1/32 scale representation of the aircraft. As you can see, Ian did a fantastic job recreating the look of the ship, expertly painting and detailing the model. Next is another famous copter, the Airwolf copter from the Airwolf TV show. The 1/48 scale model was produced by AMT and was also released in 1984. And as you can see, it's another example of how meticulous Ian is at detailing and painting. Ian says he took a 30-year hiatus from model building and decided to dig out old kits that he had in his collection to work on. Beautiful work, Ian. Thanks for sharing, and welcome back to the hobby. Alright, well, our next model is from modeler Mike Walston, whose work I've featured here before. This is a scratch-built model of the sand ships as depicted in Ray Bradbury's The Martian Chronicles. Michael is a lifelong fan of the novel, and ever since reading it as a kid, has wanted to scratch build the sand ships. But he held off for years because he was unable to find a shape that he felt would work. One day, he was inspired by seeing a Star Trek Voyager Kazon kit upside down on a shelf, and it reminded him of a Viking ship. He combined the model with a praying mantis toy from Mattel and created the cells from plastic soda bottles. The otherworldly paint scheme was created using chrome silver, smoke, and transparent green. I'm sure Ray Bradbury would have been impressed by this beautiful rendering. Thanks for sharing, Mike. Next up is a 1/350 scale discovery from modeler David Pasquinelli. David decided to paint the model as it was seen in the movie 2010. By that time, the discovery was covered in sulfur from one of Jupiter's volcanic moons, giving it an orange hue. To simulate this, David mixed a variety of colors, then followed up with washes to bring out the details. Really nice job, David, and what a unique representation of this famous ship. Next up is a studio-sized build by modeler Patrick Hannes of the Ranger from the 1980s Buck Rogers TV show. He tells me that this model was made of a cast from the original filming miniature, and he's pretty certain of it because the person who gave it to him owns actual filming props and miniatures from the industry. It's made of heavy resin with only 6 pieces, measures 20 inches in length, and weighs approximately 5 to 6 pounds. Patrick points out that the windows are actually made of clear plastic that was painted from the inside and were cut to fit. This is a beautiful replica, Patrick. Congratulations on a great build. Thanks for allowing me to share it. Next up is a beautiful figure of Michael Keaton as Batman by modeler Omar Baez. The bust was designed by Eric Sousa and printed on Omar's Mono X 3D printer. One thing that particularly drew me to this piece is the beautiful finish on Batman's suit. For this, Omar used electric blue from Vallejo's Space Dust Color Shifters line, and it really brings the figure to life. These paints are designed to be multi-chromatic, providing a vibrant sparkle to the model surface. Each flake within the paint presents a variety of colors depending on the angle you're viewing it from. And this is how it provides the color shift that the paint is named for. The color shift can be further enhanced when used over gloss black. I'm not too familiar with these paints, but they really provide a unique effect and a beautiful finish. Really nice job, Omar. Let's head on now to the Jerry Anderson universe with models from Robert Baird. Here we have a beautiful replica of the Thunderbird 1 ship. It's a 1/144 scale model from AIP, and Robert did a beautiful job with painting and detailing it. Next, we have a few from his Space 1999 collection, starting off with his diorama of the nuclear waste facilities. It's a 1/48 scale representation, and the kit was produced by MPC. Robert was meticulous with the detailing here, even adding the lights to the posts that surround the diorama. The model kit also came with this 1/24 scale model of the moon buggy, complete with the astronauts. The nice display base was made of 2 shades of model railway ballast sprinkled over a styrofoam base. He then applied light color with an airbrush. And finally, we have some shots of 2 of his 1/48 scale eagles, which are both beautifully done. Here are some shots of a cargo eagle and a rescue eagle, which also includes a detailed passenger pod interior. It even has a spacesuit hanging there in this compartment. Just outstanding work, Robert. Thank you for sharing. And staying on the subject of eagles, here's a submission by modeler Yasunaka. This is the 1/72 scale eagle by MPC that he exquisitely detailed. This particular model is more accurate than the model released back in the 1970s, and as you can see, Yasunaka added various shades for the exterior paneling and outfitted his ship with lighting inside the cockpit as well as the exterior. Thanks to Yasunaka for allowing me to share these pictures. Really nice job. So let's wrap up our slideshow here with a couple of Star Wars builds, the first of which is this very unique display from modeler Kelvin Naff. It is called the Alphabet Squadron Secret Base, inspired by the Star Wars novel Alphabet Squadron by Alexander Freed. As you can see, the lit display includes the 1/144 scale Bandai kits of the B, X, A, Y, and U wings, which are seen within the hangar section. The lower part was constructed using the Bandai Death Star Attack Kit, which was also enhanced with pieces from other kits and some 3D printed odds and ends, which he designed for this build. The piece measures 25 inches in length and 11 inches high, and you can follow the build on his channel, and the link is below. He calls himself the Mediocre Modeler, but I have to say his work is far from mediocre. Thanks, Kelvin, for allowing me to share this great piece. And here we have a Bandai 1/12 scale BB-8 by modeler William Crane, who currently serves in the Australian Army. William told me that he was motivated by my channel to have a crack at a Bandai kit, and also that recent lockdowns left him time to pursue old hobbies. For this kit, he used no paint, but he did weather it with black and desert washes from Vallejo. Really nice job there, William. Thank you for sending these pictures and for allowing me to share your work. So again, just some amazing models there. I do appreciate you guys sending in pictures of the models, and I do periodically go on Facebook, kind of see who's posting their finished projects there, and occasionally I'll reach out to those modelers to see if they'd be interested in having me feature their model here on the slideshow, so I do appreciate them allowing me to do so. Thanks, guys. And if you are interested in having your model featured here on a slideshow, just send the pictures to ismslideshow@gmail.com. That's ismslideshow@gmail.com. And if you could send a handful of pictures with some decent resolution and a brief description of your project there, I'd be happy to feature it here. Okay, well now it's time to talk about a project I think you'll find helpful with model building. And what I'm going to talk about this go around is two-part epoxy putty. Now, if you're not familiar with it by chance, they are space-filling adhesives that harden at room temperature. Basically, the way they work is they're stored in two separate parts, and when you're ready to use it, you take equal pieces of each part and you knead them together. So it's very simple to mix them, and you have a certain amount of time to work with it, so you'll be able to mold it and shape it, and then it'll begin to harden. Now, I have turned more and more to two-part epoxy since my first experience using this stuff, and it's just something that I think you'll find helpful in a variety of different situations. Now, my first experience with this stuff was with this guy here, and this is a Force Awakens Stormtrooper. That was a toy conversion, and I saw this guy on YouTube doing this conversion, and he suggested, because the figure comes in a very stiff pose, he suggested to take the limbs and reposition them so that it would look a bit better. And so I did just a very simple repositioning here of his arm, just so he could hold his rifle differently. And so I just cut off the arm at the elbow, and when you're reattaching it, you need something to fill in that section that's going to match the opposite side. So he suggested using this two-part epoxy stuff, and I went over to Harbor Freight, and they have a general use epoxy putty that you can find very inexpensively, and it worked out great. So of course there are a variety of epoxy putties available. If you go to the store, you'll find them in the adhesive section, and when you start looking there on the shelf, you're going to see that they all have different labels. Some are better suited according to the label for metals, others for woods and plastics. There's others that if you're working with stuff around water and you need to seal against water. So just check out the label and choose the appropriate one, obviously. I've used the all-purpose one for things like this. As I said, that was the Harbor Freight general use epoxy putty. This one's made by Galileo. And I also use this stuff, by the way, to secure the tubes that I use. I often use brass tubes that are hollow with my models that are being wired or lit, because the wires need to fit through the tubing down to the base of the stand. And so there's various ways you can secure tubing or metal pipes onto a stand. You can find special fittings and nuts and bolts and those types of things. But if you have a heavy model, that's probably the way to go. But with these models that I've been working with, they're really lightweight, and the epoxy putty is more than enough adhesion there for what I need. Now, stuff I've been using most recently is this here from Milliput, and Milliput makes two kinds. They make a standard and a superfine white. It's my understanding that they differ a bit in finish. I've used both of them, and I found them to be fairly similar. But you'll notice at the Milliput website that they describe the superfine white as having a finer finish, so you can use it with ceramics. But I've used their standard stuff as well, like I said, and for my purposes, I found them fairly similar. I just tend to buy whatever's available. I find this stuff at Hobby Lobby, and it runs about $14, and it comes with 2 bars. Again, of the separate components that you need, and they're wrapped in a saran wrap sort of stuff, and you just keep them separate until you're ready to use them. So the most recent example of this was the Ptolemy class conversion I did last month. There was quite a gap between the 2 parts of the strut, and I needed to cover that, and it worked out perfectly. Now, another product that I've used is Epoxy Sculpt Putty, and if you go to their website, they describe Epoxy Sculpt as having the consistency of molding clay along with the adhesion power of epoxy, and it worked perfectly for Spock's boots. This is the AMT spot kit. You might recall this build from a couple years ago. And I converted him into the Mirror Universe Spock. And because of that, he needed a couple of things. He needed boots, and he needed a sash around his waist. And epoxy sculpt worked perfectly for that. What I love about epoxy sculpt, and you can use water with milliput to soften it up as well, but it worked great because I was able to shape it fairly easily with water, and just took a little bit of patience there to get the right shape. But when it was all done, it worked out great. Another use for epoxy sculpt was the cape on this build of the Blurg, with Mando riding the Blurg here, and it worked out great for that. Very easy to use. So if you haven't tried two-part epoxy, I highly recommend it. It has a variety of uses. You'll find it very helpful to have in your drawer when you need it. And you can find this stuff at Harbor Freight. You can find the general stuff that they sell. It's their generic brand. You can find the more name brands there at Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware. And then milliput you can find at hobby stores or at Hobby Lobby. And the epoxy sculpt stuff you can find at Michael's or arts and craft stores. Alright, well, this month's modeling tip actually is about 3D printing. I know not everyone is into 3D printing, but I felt it was important enough to leave this here, especially many of you are, if you're not into it, are considering getting into 3D printing. And so this last week, just a bit of sad news here, I was just kind of going through my collection and taking a look at a few things, and I noticed this. You can see there are some major cracks that have happened here now with these sculpts. This one's Aang from the last Avatar. We've got this one here that's happened to Batman. And this one, sadly enough, is the Mandalorian and Blurg sculpt that I just talked about with the two-part epoxy. Yeah, so as you can imagine, very big disappointment, particularly with the Mandalorian sculpt. Because not only he has cracks, but also Queel too has cracks in him as well. And the Aang sculpt, I put a lot of work into both of those. Batman, not as big of a deal because that was a practice run to begin with. I always intended to print him a little larger, but I thought he turned out okay, so that's why I had him in my collection. But yeah, very, very disappointed to see that. So why did this happen? Well, it has to do with water washable resin. And the fact that I did not allow enough time between the washing and the rinsing process and the curing of it. And that's really what it amounts to. When I posted this on Facebook, a number of people who are experienced with 3D printing posted the same answer, so it seems to be the consensus here. Water washable apparently tends to retain moisture more so than the regular stuff, and I imagine that might have to do also with the fact that alcohol or acetone, some people are using acetone to clean their stuff, evaporates a lot faster. So because the water is still stuck there in time, it will cause the cracks to form in between the layers. And so if you are using water washable, and now that I know this, it doesn't make me want to switch back to water washable, because I actually did switch from it to regular resin simply because I was having all kinds of problems with it. At first I attributed these problems to my inexperience with printing process. I started seeing that it was very brittle. Any of the models I did hollow out did crack, and by the way, these are all solid pieces, so that's why I used up the rest of the water washable that I had and printed the pieces solid, because I thought that was part of the problem, is I wasn't getting the resin rinsed out properly enough, so some of it remained, and that caused the cracks to form in the prints that I did have issues with. And so I figured, why not print them solid? Won't have any issues, but unfortunately I still did. So the take home here is make sure you're giving enough time between the rinsing and washing part of it all and the curing, and I'm doing the same thing even though I'm using now regular resin. I'm definitely lengthening the amount of time between the two parts of that process. So I know there are a number of you who aren't 3D printing at this point, but you are possibly thinking about getting into it, and because there are a variety of different resins out there, you just have to know they all work a little differently, and water washable in and of itself is something that seems like a good concept, There are many people who had issues with it, which is why there are a lot of people who don't use it, but there are a number of people who have had success with it, and this is what I'm finding to be the case, is they definitely had enough time between the washing and the curing. All right, well that does it for this segment of Hot Off the Bench. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave it down below in the comment section and I'll get back to you, or you can email me at interstellarmodeler@gmail.com. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.